Hello, everybody. Welcome to Backstage Pass. My name is Jeff Senior. Today is an amazing day. It's lovely. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. It's sunny and hot. Big surprise. And we're having a big day here. And today we have an amazing individual. As a musician and a singer-songwriter, I just can't wait to talk to this individual and get to know him even better. This guy is a publicist to the stars. And you talk about the stars, you name it. He's probably met them or worked with them and handled what they do. And I want to, without further ado, just please introduce Mr. George Dassinger. George, how's it going?
Good, Jeff.
It's good to see you. Thank you
And
for
thank you for
coming
all the
on.
compliments. It's
Oh,
like you as a musician, this is just what you do. You don't like it's not an ego thing. You kind of see it differently. You see the world differently. Um,
yeah.
but everybody goes, "Oh, you work with so many stars." Yeah, and you know,
Yeah, and it's interesting about that, and then we'll get into some things. I've flown so many of them over the years. I mean, I flew Johnny Carson, I flew Bob Hope, I've flown, John Travolta, Kurt Russell, all these people over the years, and you realize they're just people.
yes.
They're just people. I wrote about it in my book. They have the same ups and downs of life that we all have, and so people on the outside sometimes don't understand that, and working with them. And sometimes some of them are more dysfunctional than anybody
Uh, ain't that the
do.
truth?
So, but I mean, you've worked with. I'm reading here: George Foster, Bee Gees, Andy Gibbs, Beach Boys, Chicago. I mean, it goes on and on and on. TV shows, Rooster with Aerosmith, Van Halen, Ted Nugent. It's the list is like it goes on and on and on. And then you were with Elektra Records, the Cars, just Anita Baker, Judy Collins. I mean, it's Linda Ronstadt, Metallica. This is so impressive. It's amazing you had enough time to even handle all those people. And, oh, wow, Paul Rogers. I love that.
Yeah,
I met Paul. We opened for them once years ago
best
here in
best voice in
Phoenix.
rock, no question about it.
Yeah, yeah, he's amazing. So, how did you get started in this business? Because the music business today, and we'll talk about that, is pretty crazy. And as a young guy, were you in New York City? Is that where you got started?
No,
And
actually, I stayed in Jersey, and there was a alternative publication sort of been inducted into Rock and Roll of Fame called the Aquarian, and
okay,
it was during my first marriage, and I didn't have any money to pay for entertainment so I figured, well, I could work for it. So
hmm
I walked into the office and I said, "You're looking for writers?" And he goes, "Yeah, can you have something in?" This was like a Wednesday. So can you have something in by Friday? Yeah, sure. I walked out. I have no idea what I'm going to write about. And lo and behold, I stayed there. It worked out. I learned to network thanks to that. It kind of started right before that. I used to write for the college paper that I went to. I'd come
okay,
home on the bus, the New York bus. I'd have 30, 40 albums under my arms. I would just do every record. I had a route. I would do record
wow,
company to record company. And someone would say, "Oh, when you go to Warner Brothers, see Bob Merlis. And when you go to Electra, see this person." And I learned to network. I didn't understand what that is. And in students that I have today,
amazing.
I try to instill that in, but they have no concept of what networking is. Oh, I
No,
text them. No, you
right,
need to meet these people face to
right,
face and start to get to
yeah,
know them. So lo and
yeah,
behold, the Aquarian. I then got offered another alternative publication about 2 or 3 years after that, to become an editor, which gave me out of a 32-page music oriented entertainment paper. I wound up with 16 pages, and then I was able to hire friends of mine to go to concerts, get do record reviews, film reviews. So that kind of opened that door. And I, during college, I worked at UPS on loading and unloading trucks. I became a friend with a guy named Joe Dera. Joe and I became really
okay,
good friends. He went on to Rogers and Cowan, and then eventually he called me up and said, "You want a job?
wow.
Meet Paul."
Amazing.
So one led to the other, and I
Yeah.
still think that holds true. So that's how it all got started. But I remember the first day walking in there, I was intimidated. There used to be a writer for Newsday named Wayne Robbins who just would yell people on the phone, just completely intimidated him. And I was
Yeah.
intimidated, I admit. And later I got to be friends with Wayne, and I once told him that, and he said, "Oh, do I come across like that?" I went, "Yeah." And
Yeah. Wow.
you learn to deal with, like you said before, they're all people. You learn to deal with difficult people, people who have emotional problems, people who are just not right that day, or they're cranky. I mean, you run through the gamut. And I
Yeah.
advise people to take psychology courses, because every psychosis known to man, and a few that haven't been defined, are in the entertainment business.
Yeah, well, and I can relate to that as well, not only in music, but I mean, dealing with bandmates and all of that. I sometimes joke it's worse than any kind of relationship because with a say a woman because it's just the egos and the things that go along with it, but also in the cockpit of an airplane, And I train a lot of young aviators into getting into the jets and tell them, you're going to deal with people that you just can't stand at times. It's rare, but it happens. And you're stuck in this little enclosed capsule going 600 miles an hour, with this individual that you just can't stand. But you have to learn to deal with that. You can't sit there because that person at some point might give you a recommendation for a
Right.
job or introduce you to somebody. And I think that's a lot of what our youth misses today.
Well, and you have a job to do. You have a job. You
Yeah,
you know you see your finite way that you do your job, and they get,
yeah,
well, I don't like this. Well, I'm sorry that you don't like it, but I cannot change my schedule the way it works. And then they have to
yeah,
come to sometimes a mutual understanding. And you got to be able to explain yourself, and without being bossy or
yeah.
condescending.
I
It's
used to
it's a knack.
I used to tell my kids all the time, the life isn't going to be fair. Somebody's going to offend you at some point, just get used to it. So, um, and you mentioned vinyl albums, that takes me back when I was a young guy playing guitar. I played in bands in high school and college and vinyl. We'd go to Tower Records. I grew up in LA, so we'd go to Tower Records and
Mhm.
shop and all the vinyl, and you'd look through the vinyl and then when you bought a piece of vinyl, you'd take it home and you'd listen to it and you would soak it in. And I remember sitting there for hours reading the lyrics, and that's gone. It's gone
Yes.
by the wayside. The average attention span seems to be about 5 seconds of individuals on an MP3, and then they're on to the next one, and it's so sad to see. So I love what you said about vinyl and those days.
Well, they have no depth of understanding in that. Oh, like they'll call the song by the person who sang it, but they didn't necessarily write it. They didn't produce it. They have no
Right.
depth of understanding that there's a whole team of people that make that happen.
Oh,
It's not all
absolutely.
Taylor Swift. It's there's a lot
Right.
behind that, as you well
Right.
know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I had somebody tell me once we were talking about my music and my band, and this individual said, where can I find your music? And I said, well, it's on Spotify or iTunes. And well, I don't pay for music. I get it all for free. And I said, well, okay. So you wouldn't think twice of going into a furniture store and taking a painting off the wall, right? Well, of course not. That's stealing. I go, well, that's what you're doing with music.
Hmm.
And I said, when the mindset that do you write or play music? Do you sing? Do you produce? The team that goes, it's not just one person, like you said. There's a team of people
Yes,
that put that song together. And honestly, for 99 cents on iTunes, that's a pretty good price.
it's a steal.
It's it's a
It's a
steal,
yes.
and it's with you forever. So I had the opportunity a few years back of meeting your lovely wife, Isabel, and we were at um, a show we did it at a fire museum,
Yes,
and
I know.
it was in
I
Burbank.
helped that.
Okay, you did, okay, yeah,
That
and
NCIS stuff. That
yes,
right.
yes, that's right, yes. So, how is she doing, by the way?
Isabel's doing great. In fact, she's going to be having a show with your network
That's
starting
what
in
I
July.
heard. I heard that.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
Well,
it's
tell her
called
hi. What's it going to be about?
Be Your Own Advocate, which
Okay.
I is a philosophy I agree with. I mean, everybody's an expert in a certain way, or minor, maybe major, but depending. you can pick their brains, and all of a sudden it gives you an idea that you wouldn't have before. And that's the beauty of working with people. Um,
Yeah.
and Isabel's very good. She went back at age 70 to get her beautician's license, which I don't know a whole lot of
Wow.
people. I wouldn't have done that. And
Yeah.
by the time I was 70, I'm done. I'm done.
At 70. Wow. That's amazing. I love that though.
And she created her own company, has, product line that she deals with, and does real well. I mean, she's and very, and we met at Rogers and Cowan, so she's got a whole background in all of understanding this and the scheduling
Yeah.
that's necessary and what to deliver, key points, et cetera, et cetera. But like you said, you're right. There's a whole team, no matter who's doing something, that makes it
Yeah.
happen. Or what my favorite one is, oh, they're an overnight sensation. I mean, and I would say, you mean after 10 years of working their ass off?
Exactly. I know. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Well, and that comes to the 10,000 hour rule that I'm sure you've heard, that,
Yes.
everybody's an expert at everything. Like, no, it takes they say about 10,000 hours of doing something to do it well, even if you're gifted at it. So, like what you learned, you learned by beating the pavement, talking to people, how to route with your vinyl and doing all that stuff. And so you started in college writing. It took years to
Well,
do
you learn from your
what you do.
mistakes. You don't learn
Right,
from your successes. For
right.
the interesting psychology behind that, and you go, "Oh, I did that. I'm never going to do that again." And then you
Oh
hone
yeah,
your act down. As a
right,
musician, you certainly. I hit that note. Maybe you heard it. Nobody else caught it whatsoever, but it'll bug you because you knew I shouldn't have done that. And then
right.
and whatever riff
Yeah.
you play the next time, you all of a sudden it's not there anymore.
Well, and aviation really teaches you that concept. The team concept,
Hmm.
when I was at Southwest Airlines 25 years, you're only as good as the team you got back taking care
Right.
of those passengers. And so it's not just about you. And like you said, anything, and you learn from your mistakes. There's none of us are perfect in aviation. Things can happen. And thank God nothing serious has ever happened, but you do things on occasion that you go, whoa, I'm never going to do that again. Because it's just like, okay, that's not aerial filming. I did a lot of aerial filming, air to air stuff for commercials and movies. And I learned a lot about, you know, being baby, and you learn from mistakes that you make along the way. Okay, we're not doing that shot ever again. That's
Hmm.
dangerous. And that kind of thing. So, um, what are you doing now? What's in your
Well,
daily life?
once COVID hit here, I was teaching at William Patterson. I was an adjunct for 20 years. And it was a
Okay.
hands-on class because the way I first started teaching it, like we're talking about late 1900s, and they would make press kits. But when I handed all that stuff in, I realized they're just not getting it. They think it's like an arts and crafts class. And that's not what it's
Okay.
about, marketing, and they didn't quite get it.
All right.
So I kind of changed the concept to making a hands-on class where they represented a real client doing a real campaign. And my favorite
Wow.
story there is I decided that we were going to represent Pete Seeger's 100th birthday. Now everybody
Okay.
knows Pete was long gone by then.
Yeah.
And so I walk into the class and I tell them, you're going to represent somebody you know nothing about. You have a limited knowledge at best. And I said, but we have to create a campaign on to make this thing work. And the deal is, though, the campaign here is his 100th birthday. So one girl
Wow.
raised her hand and says, well, can he come and talk to us? I said, no, he's been dead for 5 years. She, and then she says, well, how do we do that? I said, you're
Uh,
better off. I said, and I don't mean to be condescending here, working with somebody that's deceased is easier to work with than somebody who's alive
huh.
because it's your campaign.
True.
You're running it. So needless to say, another girl raised her hand. She said, well, what kind of songs did he write? Did he play? And I said, you guys need to do some research here. I said, Google it. I said, Google his name and find out. So
Right.
once then COVID came in, I realized hands-on didn't exist. It was towards the end of the semester anyway, and I thought after 20 years, maybe I'll call it a day. By then, I was
Mhm.
also a permanent substitute at a local high school, and I was teaching marketing and financial literacy via same deal. Everything was
Mhm.
talking to my laptop, and then
Right.
I would have a class scanned on it, but they would, I would have to say, "Hey guys, this is not Home Depot. I don't want to look at your fan on the top of you because they have to have like they didn't have a shirt on,
Hmm.
and you just
Great.
and that stuff didn't when you
Hmm.
decide to teach, you didn't think that people would be half naked in their room,
Well,
and
that's how they board our plane too. They come
yes.
down to the airline. That's how they travel.
Hmm.
Literally, they just roll
So
out of bed. Here I am.
so at that point, I just decided I had been independent anyway, and I didn't know I would like teaching. I went to William Patterson, like I said, through the head of the music department. I need a music studies for adjunct, and
Hmm.
I ran everything by him, and he approved it. And he was great to work with, a guy named Steve Marconi,
Yeah.
who is now retired as well. And then after that sort of ended, I always, like I said, I became a permanent substitute. I didn't even know those existed, which means I work every day.
Hmm.
They call it vacancy profile. So I'm a math teacher one day or half a day, and then I'm a history teacher, and then I'm taking over a gym class. And actually, I enjoy the diversity, and the kids are great to work with. Although
Hmm.
I think their future is not great. They don't have the
Yeah.
opportunities that you and I certainly were
Yeah.
privileged to have. Um,
Yeah.
but I like working with kids. And, another kid said to me, goes, "You work with Metallica and Motley Crue. What the hell are you doing here?" I said, I said, "You guys are so much easier to deal with than dealing with like a Nikki Sixx who's shooting heroin at
Yeah.
the time."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, he once said to me that he thought all the great American writers shot heroin. And I went, "No, most of them were alcoholics. Maybe Edgar Allan Poe, you could argue that point." I said, "But
Hmm.
they were all alcoholics." And then
Yeah.
Tommy Lee is standing there and says, "Nikki, if you overdose, I'm not coming to your funeral." And I thought that was time for me to bow out of that conversation as quickly as possible.
Wow. Yeah. I personally can't, and I was lucky because aviation kept me out of all that stuff, even though I was playing music back then when I was getting, but I'd go to all the parties and I just, and especially in Hollywood and California and I just, fortunately I stayed away from all of that. But yeah, you see all of that that goes on. It seems like a lot of them as they age, they finally wake up and go, "Ooh, I better
Yes,
stop. I
I'm
better
glad that
stop
Nikki's
this."
sober now. He's straight.
Yeah.
Talks about spirituality, which I thought wouldn't even be a
Yeah.
word in his vocabulary at this point.
Yeah.
And good for him. Not
Yeah,
that I got along with
absolutely.
those guys because they're very California. They were gang members
Mhm.
originally from Long Beach.
Yeah.
That's everybody thinks, oh, the dirt. That's how they got this. It's kind of true and kind of not true. I said, but
Yeah.
don't let the truth get in the way of a good story kind of philosophy on that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but here, when I went to a lecture, my dad calls me up and says, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Well, let's talk." He goes, "No, we have to talk in person." Comes over, we're driving around the car, Jeff, for about a half hour. I said, "For God's
Yeah.
sake, Dad, please tell me, what do you want to ask me?" "All right, I'm going to come out and say it." "Do they force drugs on you at the record company?" I said, "It doesn't work like that, Dad." And I said, "You should put a little faith in me. Being a Marine, former Marine, I said, you get the job done. You've always told me about, and that's what I do. I get the job done. It's not about
Yeah.
getting high." I said, granted, I've been to a party where somebody rolled a joint. I won't tell you who it was.
Hmm.
But I didn't participate in that because I'm working. I'm like you. There's a job you have to do. And if you don't have that ethic, you can get caught up in all that stupid crap and look where you wind up.
Absolutely. I would think it would be cool to have you as a teacher. I mean, it's just, and it's funny you mentioned the youth about, well, who is that? And oh,
Mm-hmm.
they've been dead 5 years. I had a gal years ago, actually, one a gal flight attendant. Not that that matters, but when we were talking, I think Paul McCartney came up and she goes, "I never knew Paul McCartney was in a band before Wings." And you're just like, okay, so it's just kind of like, yeah, actually, he was in a band before Wings. And you listen to their story, they probably sucked at first. They knocked it out in bars in Liverpool for years. Everybody, like you said, they look at them, oh, they're here, but no, they
Right.
started for years, thousands of hours of performing and playing before they probably got decent.
And was
And
turned down by 6 record labels before they ever
isn't that
got signed.
amazing? I
Yes.
love those stories. Yeah,
Well,
I love those
most of
stories.
the A&R people I got to know, some were really good music people and they had those ears, and others were just business people. And if it
Yeah.
meant that it could turn a profit, and sign that act, they would do that. So it had nothing, sometimes nothing to do with music. It had to do
Yeah.
with it would fit their and the way they saw, oh well, they have oh, they're too guitar driven, so that's phasing out. And they would make that
Right.
assumption, and it really wasn't necessary.
Yeah. What advice would you give today to young people, kids, like myself, and no, coming into the music industry?
we
It's a different industry, obviously, than it was
Yes.
when you got into it. A lot different, and and I think now you look at there are so many artists out there, and that's the advent of the internet, iTunes, and all of that kind of stuff, Spotify. So anybody can get a recording on there. So, and like I say, our attention span is so short. What advice do you have, if any, to somebody young and up and coming trying to get into this industry?
It's a good question. I was in a class the other day, and a kid comes up and says, "Oh, I'm in my band. You want to manage our band?" And I went, "No, I'm done managing." I said, "But what do you guys do?" He said, "Oh, we
Uh-huh.
did a free garage show. We played in our garage, and 30 people from the neighborhood showed up." And I said, "That's good. That's good."
Yeah.
I said, Barbara and Beach and I were having this discussion the other day about Grateful Dead. Oh, well, Kreutzmann always says, how did you become so popular?" And he said, one fan at a time. And he's right.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that back to
Yeah.
these kids, I said, well, what else are you guys doing? And he goes, we don't know. I said, you doing any charity work? And he went, no. Why? Should we? I said, yes. I said, yeah, Christmas
Absolutely.
is 6 months away. I said, find a club. Don't even worry about getting paid and do it where everybody comes in. They bring a toy. I said, I did this
Uh,
with one band. After 3 years, we had 2 trucks full of toys that we would deliver to the kids.
wow. That's a
And I
fabulous idea.
well, that's what you have to do. You got to
Yeah.
pyramid it. Nothing happens
Hmm.
overnight. You know that. I know that. And don't expect it to be, oh, next year we'll be famous. No, it's a
No.
gig and keep working at it and build it. I said you could turn that in like with this one particular band, like I said, after it was, oh, are we doing it next year? Let's look for a bigger place. And they could.
Hmm.
It evolved all on its own. So, but you got to start. And print doesn't mean what it used to be. Um,
Hmm.
Music, like as you pointed out, you can know a song, but you don't know the personalities. You don't know the names of who even wrote the song, if the band even wrote it or they didn't write it, who the
Right.
producer was. They need to
Right.
start understanding that it's a study and it's an academic way of approaching music. So, but they think everything's given to them. That whole
Hmm.
entitlement that teens today are languishing, they got to
Yeah.
realize that's going to run its course too, and you're going to be on your own, kid. So you better start figuring it out now. But
Yeah.
and the lead singer for this particular high school band said, "You made me think differently." I said, "That was the idea." I said, "You got to
That's
start
fabulous.
marketing yourself. And what is your name? I don't know your name. I don't know the band. Do you have identity? Do you have something special that you do? Give advice to somebody else so they don't make the same mistakes you did?" And I said, it puts you in a position of authority. And I said, and
Right.
all of a sudden someone says, "Oh, I heard about them," and they pass it on. And that's how but word of mouth, I still believe, is your strongest way of getting notoriety. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some bands you can't. I always say, well, they're faceless. You can't be faceless today. You have
Yeah.
to be. It's a visual
It,
medium that we work with.
absolutely. Well, and I did that with my band, and we always I put something bigger than myself over. It wasn't look at me, I'm in a band, or it was like, what can we do to influence the world through our music? There's 12 notes in music, and there's octaves, but there's only 12 notes, and the power of music is so incredible to me. So to be able to so we chose to go first responders, veterans, things like
Mm-hmm.
that, servants' hearts, doing events for kids, doing inspiring people through the music I wrote or have written, to live your dreams, to live every day to the max. And what happens is that opens up doors that you look back and go, whoa, we got to play on the USS Missouri. We got to
Mm-hmm.
play on the USS Midway. I got to play in the Pentagon once. I would have never done that if it had been about me, how much you paying me for this gig. So the guys that I have in the band, we're all on the same page. Hey, guess what, guys? Sometimes we're going to volunteer our time because this is a really important deal. and then one door opens another,
Hmm.
and you move on from there. So that's really profound knowledge that you just gave.
Well,
So,
it's exactly how it works, and to make it's a workable, but ultimately you need to create a campaign. You can't just say, oh, we'll just do charity. Where's those charity events? What does that evolve to? Like you said, you can
right,
meet people, but your own game plan.
right.
Little Anthony, I always thought gave me the greatest compliment. He said, George, you explained to me why I didn't get in the Rock and Roll of Fame, because there was never a campaign to reestablish what I accomplished and what I did and
Yeah.
where I am today. And I said,
Okay.
that's what you got to do, because people don't have depth of understanding. Not that it's not accessible. You and I know that
Right.
we can Google anybody and find, but they don't do that for whatever the reason.
Right.
And I don't fully understand why. I
Yeah.
like, for
Well,
example, as a fan, a movie fan, I study people that are extras in a movie, and they got a basic listing at the end of the show. Well, I want to know. I've seen this guy in dozens and dozens of TV shows, yet I have no idea what his name is, and I
isn't
felt that
that
I was wrong.
crazy? Yeah.
I wasn't giving
Yeah.
him the proper respect. And now, and my son makes fun of me. He said, Dad, you know all these character actors. I said, because they deserve at least for you to know their name.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, little Anthony, you mentioned little Anthony. I got to be on a parade float in New
Yes.
York City and on Veterans Day parade. And what a great guy. I remember being in awe of him, and I'm sitting there like, okay, what do you want? Do you want me to do this, or I'll just sit there? And he goes, Jeff, I just got off this tour. I'm kind of tired. Do you mind just singing? You do the whole thing, and I'll just wave to the crowds. I'm like, okay. And just what an honor to meet him, and you're sitting there going, I'm in Manhattan, I'm in New York City on a parade float singing. This is crazy,
Mhm.
and so those opportunities are priceless. So I can't thank you enough, George, for coming on the show. It's an honor to
Oh,
have
no,
you
Jeff.
and have you meet everybody,
Least
and
I
it's just yeah.
least I could do for you and Barbara. And I
Well,
participate. If I can help in any sort of way, just let me know.
Barbara's amazing. She
Yes, she
produces
is.
this thing, and Charles, who does our editing and recording all this, our team.
Thanks,
And
Charles.
yeah, and it's just crazy. Barb's got the military appreciation channel and all of that going on, and we're just out to kind of inspire the world. And if you ever get to Phoenix, please look me up and say hi. I'd love to have coffee or whatever,
Well, let's do that.
and say hi to that lovely wife of yours, and tell her hi.
I will.
So,
Thank you so
all
much.
right. Thank you.
See you
Folks, this
guys.
has been Backstage Pass, George Dassinger, and our fabulous guest. And come back and see us again soon. God bless you all, and we will talk to you soon. God bless America.
See you
I've
guys.
got one life that I've been given, one life that I've been living, one life with a smile on